Welcome everyone to Positive Perspectives on Accounting, the virtual seminar series that explores the enabling aspects of accounting in society. That is
Roel Boomsma, located in Sydney.
And Lukas Goretzki, located in Stockholm, would like to explore in this episode an important aspect of academic life, namely attending conferences and workshops that allow us to present and discuss our research with colleagues from universities all over the world.
For many of us, this time of year normally involves quite a bit of traveling to attend these international workshops and conferences. Now, this has obviously changed in light of the coronavirus pandemic. While many conferences and workshops have been cancelled, some have actually taken the brave step to move to a fully online format. Now, as this online format is very different from the face-to-face engagement that we are accustomed to, we have invited Martin Carlsson-Wall from the Stockholm School of Economics to talk about his experiences of making this change happen. Thank you, Martin, for taking the time to talk to us today. Now, the COVID-19 crisis has brought a huge digital push also for us accounting academics. Martin, I was wondering, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself, and could you reflect upon how this shift to online working has affected you?
So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to this podcast. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Accounting at the Stockholm School of Economics. In this school, I basically have two roles. One is that I'm the head of the master program in accounting, valuation, and financial management, and also the director for the Accounting and Financial Management Center of Excellence. But I also, coming back to the conference, as a role, I'm the director for the Center for Sports and Business. So basically, my role in the school is I work with CFOs and controllers, and I work with club presidents in sports.
Mm-hmm. And Martin, in this episode, we are particularly interested in your experience with the virtual conferences that you just touched upon. As the director of the Center for Sports and Business at the Stockholm School of Economics, you recently organized yourself a conference. Can you tell us a little bit about what the conference was about and what the original idea with the conference was?
So originally, we had planned a physical workshop here in Stockholm. 2-day workshop, very similar to MASOP in accounting, about 40-50 individuals, and really a sort of a high-class paper development workshop. But then in early March, we obviously realized it's not going to be a physical conference here in Stockholm. And then the sort of the idea came up, should we try the virtual format instead? And having spent quite a lot of time trying to gather the people, we said, let's try it. So within just a month before the actual conference took place, we just shifted and went into a virtual format. And that required quite a lot of change. First of all, we realized that we couldn't have a 2-day workshop. So we opted for a 1-day workshop. But what happened was we got a lot of quality submissions. And then you start realizing, we thought we would have a 4-hour workshop. And then with all the quality submission becomes, no, but we need to sort of, add other material. So we ended up with a 9-hour Zoom workshop. And I remember the day of the workshop, we had prepared them quite a lot for over a month, working quite intensively. And I was just looking at my colleague, Christopher, because we were sitting in the same room here at the Executive Education in Stockholm, and thinking, is this going to massively fail? What's going to happen? So even if we had sort of prepared a lot, I still felt, just as we were starting, I am so unsure if this is going to work or not. So luckily, I think it went quite well. But with many new things, I think that's the biggest challenge when you prepare for the first time. You don't know if you're prepared enough.
What were your main worries that you had, or the main challenges that you experienced along the way organizing the conference?
Well, obviously, just changing the format from a physical 2-day format to a 1-day Zoom format. When we made the decision, it seemed like, yeah, it's no problem. We just do 1 day of Zoom. And then when you get into the details, it's actually very similar to when you plan a teaching session or when you write the paper. When you start, the idea sounds so great, but when you get into the details, you start realizing the problems. And I think that's the sort of the main challenge. For example, since we had so many high quality submissions, we only allowed 6-minute presentation of a discussant. So we sort of cut out the presentation from the authors. So we had 6-minute presentation from a discussant, and then just 3 minutes from the authors. And in hindsight, obviously 9 minutes, I think the good part is that each paper, especially if you share all the papers in advance through Dropbox and people can prepare, the good part is you get a rhythm where you constantly shift between papers. But in hindsight, I think we should have allowed maybe 3-4 minutes, maybe sort of almost standardize 1 or 2 slides for each presentation. What is the paper about from the authors? Then go to discussants and then back. So there's many sort of small details that, even though I think this workshop went quite well, you constantly learn. And that's how it is.
Hey, and Martin, you mentioned that although it sounds quite easy to start with, we just do a long Zoom session. You mentioned that there's quite a bit of detailed planning involved. What were some of the tools that you used in order to, for example, stick to this very strict time planning? And what sort of other tools did you use in sort of make sure that people actually engage with the presentations as well?
I think that the really good news is that it doesn't cost a lot. All the tools like Zoom, Word, you have them. So the really good news with the virtual conferences is it's all about knowing the details. And it's those who prepare the most that's going to win. So it's not all about, having fancy tools or fancy anything. Everything is about, very similar to writing an article, doing it again, or like when you do the pod, knowing the nitty-gritty. So for example, what we did was we spent quite a lot of time doing a very detailed program. I actually, before the conference, thought it was almost too detailed. It was like minute to minute for 9 hours. But actually what that helps is that all participants know, okay, now we're on track or off track. And I think that really helped. Another thing that we did, which worked really well, we had, I think, 6 different elements throughout the day. And some of the elements were sort of very classical, extremely the same as a normal physical workshop. So we had invited keynote speakers, which is really good, because then when you have people which are at the forefront of research, you get also high quality submissions, because people want to hear on what are the thought leaders in the field saying, and then they submit. And then you also get really good quality. So keynote speakers. We also had panels, which is another thing which is really good. Third thing, obviously, full paper presentations, but then we also had idea generation presentations in management and strategy. This was basically a strategy and management conference on theory development, but using sports data. So in strategy and management, they basically divide up between full papers and idea proposals. I thought I learned a lot from that. I think in accounting, we could do much more on idea proposals. And then we actually added a third element, which was quite new even to the strategy and management people, which was idea generation. So you had, full papers, and then you had, which are normal sort of conference papers. And then you had idea proposals, which was maybe 3 to 5 pages. And then we had breakout rooms with sessions of 15 minutes where people were just meeting and coming up with ideas. And in some sessions, maybe there was an idea that will come into an idea proposal moving forward. But it was a great way of meeting and networking. So I think those sort of idea generation sessions, especially in the afternoon when people get tired, that's something that I would definitely keep.
Hey, and Martin, it sounds like there were a lot of activities going on during the day, and you actually managed to pull off quite an interactive conference by the sounds of it. To bring you back to the organizational aspects, you must have worked with a team of people. And how did you sort of allocate the different roles, and what were these roles amongst the team?
So the organizing team were 4 individuals, but already from the start. And I think here is potentially a little bit of a strategic decision from the beginning. Do you want to do a sort of a workshop, MASOP type of workshop, where you know the people and where you can assign roles? Or is it more like a large-scale conference where people sort of go back and forth? And luckily with this more intimate type of workshop format, one thing is that you directly want to create a session of co-creation. So we were 4 people in the organizing team. I think that worked well, because if you become 5, 6, 7, it becomes a problem of scheduling meetings. So it's a little bit here of a trade-off. If you think that, well, let's be 8 people, that's good because you can divide up the task. But if you want to move quickly, making decisions and all of that becomes problematic. So for me, I think actually 3, 4 people in a core that runs the conference. And then maybe a second layer with maybe 5, 6 other people that have, specific roles, keynote speakers, panels, something like that. And then the rest, the third layer is everyone will have a role. Discussant, just being, coming up with the first idea. You highlight people that, potentially you can say something in the chat. Actually, I think an analogy is this is like a wedding. In the wedding, you have yourself and your partner that sort of decides everything. But then it's crucial that the family, around you help out, because otherwise a lot of people are just standing thinking what's going to happen in the wedding. So I think that's sort of, I was thinking, oh, this is like a wedding, because I felt really nervous before and it's a lot at stake. But if you sort of similar to a wedding, think about the organization. And I think also with that analogy, it's not the most costly weddings which are the best experiences. It's the best thought through weddings which are the best experiences. So that's why I sort of like the wedding analogy of this is something really important, but with the right organization and attention to detail, it doesn't need to be costly and everyone can do it basically.
And how did you, because you mentioned preparation on your end, how did you prepare the participants before the conference started for this event?
And here I think you have 3 issues. First of all, you need to have the schedule. So in hindsight, the schedule is super critical, especially with the virtual conferences, because the attention span, and it's almost like playing in a band. Everyone needs to know what's going to happen. So preparing everyone with the schedule and getting the schedule out, I think we had it out almost like 2-3 weeks in advance. So it doesn't come, the day before or anything. Then secondly, it's a Dropbox. And the schedule you can do just in Word, with a nice table. Secondly, Dropbox, and also ensuring that in the Dropbox you can find all the papers. You divide them up after full papers, idea proposals, etc. And then the third element is to assign roles. Because when people see in the schedule, okay, I'm going to be a discussant here, then they sort of stay awake, they don't fall off. And so I think that it's almost like a teaching now. I mean, I haven't done that with my students, but I think actually assigning roles is really good to keep people's attention span there.
What was your impression? How did the participants during the conference, how did they adjust to the new setting and also to the roles that you assigned to them?
2 things. First of all, obviously, when there's a long day, some participants go often on and off. Here, I just think you just need to allow for it. So don't get, stressed or anything. Another thing is that when they have roles, they sort of stay alert much more. And also one thing that we actually had thought about that a little bit before, start with some really good keynotes or something that you feel that you get off to a good start. So really plan the day so that the front end, also, the analogy to a real paper, you need a good introduction to sort of keep everyone alive and get the interest up. And then I think after lunch, you need to have these interactive idea generation sessions. So, really good schedule, really great start. So people are like, yeah, but this is good. This is really good. Then maybe you could, I don't want to say lower quality, but, have a session. I noticed, for example, that before lunch, we had full paper sessions and we had quite many. So a participant said that, well, before lunch, I was a little bit tired. And I think you just got to realize if you have a full day, you'll go through some of those instances. But then after lunch, we had some other program, panel debates and other things where sort of the energy kept coming up.
Did you think that through beforehand, how you can manage the energy level throughout the conference? Or was that something that you then experienced along the way?
No, we thought it through a lot, debated it also, I should say, in the organizing team. But I was still super nervous if it would work. So now, having done one thing, now I kind of know and I would feel more secure. Okay, let's put this here, let's put this there. But I was not as nervous as my own wedding, but it was like much more nervous than any sort of teaching session.
Building on your wedding metaphor, Martin, because at a wedding it's also important that those who attend the wedding, that they think it was a super event. The perspective of the participant counts. So what kind of feedback did you receive from the speakers and the attendees of the conference?
I think partly because this was the first virtual conference that many of the participants, including us, had been part of. It was a lot of positive feedback. So since we prepared quite a bit, it was surprising how well it went. But I think moving forward, if we would do it the second time, then the expectations would go up. So it worked well, but I think partly because people did not know what to expect, and they were expecting 9 hours of Zoom to be really boring. And then when we started off with some good elements, the energy got going. One thing that is very easy to do, but you easily forget, for example, to get things going, is how do you mobilize the chat function? I have problems with that when I do my own teaching now, but we managed that really well. And that was something that we did not think about. We just started saying, hi, everyone, welcome. Could you just in the chat write where you are? So lower the barriers. And when you see like 40 participants from all over the world, that was like, oh, now let's get going. That was like, 2 minutes into the conference. So I think when that had happened, and also since we've sort of prepared some people to, can you use the chat a little bit more? I remember, people started sharing references. People started giving really thoughtful comments in the chat function. So I think in that sense, it was actually much better than a physical conference where you just raise your hands, because we could, save the chat conversations and also send back to all the participants. I think that worked really well. So there's actually, when you know the details, there's a lot of low cost, really easy to do things that increases the quality of the conference quite a bit, actually.
Is there anything that you would do differently in the next edition?
So in the next edition, and especially now when people are used to Zoom, I would, and we said it directly afterwards, we will never do a 9-hour Zoom day. Never again. I think we were really lucky. I will do a half day, and I will also ensure that for every hour, only schedule about 45 minutes. Because normally people, then you have like 5 minutes to allow for a little bit of a delay, and then people have 10 minutes of break every hour. And then you can just let people go for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, or you can actually use that time productively for more humoristic issues, like telling people, go outside, take a picture, upload it in the chat. All these ideas, how people, I don't want to say personalize, or maybe demonstrate the physical environment where they are, so it becomes more personal, that really adds. And that also helps people to get to know each other much better if they see a little bit where you are and what it looks like.
Now, in reflecting upon the differences between this online conference that you were involved in and the previously normal physical conferences that we used to attend. What do you see as the main drawbacks of this virtual conference compared to the physical format?
Well, obviously one is attention span. You need to work much harder on the sequence of elements, because otherwise people just get zoomed out or start watching, the local newspaper online or something else. Also, what you don't get, and I actually think that's going to be quite hard virtual, you need to understand the expectations, how far you can take it. So for me, I think one thing that I've reflected on, especially since I done some research on emotions, is the importance of senses. And here online we have really good for what we can see and what we can hear, but you don't smell anything, you don't taste anything, you don't sit close to people. And I think when that happens, the magic in a physical conference, it will be extremely difficult to replicate. So for me, it's much more of thinking the future to me lies in hybrids. So basically where I think that physical conferences, they will need to very thoughtfully go through the elements. So the experience in a physical conference is at its best, because when it is, it will be unbeatable. No virtual conference would ever beat that. But when you combine the both, so you have, something before the conference, and then you've actually thought through the entire sort of conference journey, where you walk, where you have the coffee, where how you sit, everything planned as you need to do in a virtual, then the physical conference experience will go up quite drastically. And then if you have a virtual sort of after talk conference, that sequence, before, during, after, where you combine virtual and physical, I think that's gonna revolutionize. I think what's gonna happen, my prediction, what's gonna happen is that with digital or virtual, the physical conferences quality will go up quite a bit, because people will not go to places that cost a lot of money, takes a lot of time. You go to a different time zone, and the experience is crappy, or at least not that much better than a virtual conference. So I think what I think is really positive is that I think we will see some super quality physical conferences after this.
How do you imagine this sort of reimagined physical conference? What do you see? What do you think will be different there?
Well, one thing, first of all, I think it's going to be, I've done some research here on the Olympics. And within the Olympic movements, there has been discussions around, should you have Olympics all over the world, which has advantages, or should you specialize it and place Olympics in large-scale cities that could then do the Olympics like every 10 years or something, where you have the infrastructure? I actually think that it's not unlikely that we will see physical conferences in larger metropolitan areas where it's quite cheap to go. You have a lot of hotels, and where, I don't know, London, Paris, Rome, where people just likes to go. So, the environment is super nice. I mean, here in Sweden, all of Sweden almost, I would say, but well, not all of Sweden, but a lot of people gather in the nicest island in Sweden. It's called Gotland, Visby. And like 50,000 people gather there 1 week in beginning of July each year. All the decision makers, politicians and everything. And that sort of large scale conference occurs because Visby in July is so nice. So I think that's going to be something really to think about. Since the physical experience needs to be superb, where do we locate it? And does that mean that we need to locate it in places that are really nice, weather-like and all of that, and maybe logistically, so you don't need to change planes? I think that's going to be really interesting. So I think, first of all, the actual conference venue needs to improve quite a bit. But I think it's going to be interesting to see if we also get almost conference cities. We'll see.
And going forward, Martin, you talked a little bit about the future of conferences. But the conferences are part basically of the whole debate discussion about research, which happens in parallel to publishing papers in journals. And you made some interesting experiences with the breakout groups, with these idea sessions. How do you think will this digital push now maybe change in a more broader sense how we as academics work together?
No, I think it's to me super fascinating both in time and space. Because obviously everyone with digitalization talks about space, and you have this virtual space versus physical space, and that we've discussed. Something that has not been discussed is time. Just one thing when you do a virtual conference, when should you start? So we opted for 9 o'clock UK time, 10 o'clock Swedish time. When we did that first chat thing, where are you? There was one guy in Boston. And for him, it was 3 a.m. So everyone was like, yeah, way to go, great. And when we ended, the people in Asia, I was like maybe one in the morning, and I was like, yeah, super. So I think this idea of time is extremely interesting when it comes to virtual. Also, when it comes to the publishing, that has been discussed a lot in terms of the temporal elements, that it takes, maybe 1 or 2 years, maybe more, to just get to a first draft if you want a high quality publication. And then the review process takes another 2 years. So from the start to the end, most likely it's going to take 4 to 5 years. With virtual, I think it's going to be really interesting to see. Will we have other ways? I still think that's sort of very similar to the physical workshop. That's going to be the sort of the top quality. So I think the top quality publications are still going to be there. But I think it could be that we have publications or a way of showing our academic writing. I don't want to. People have tried blogs, so maybe that doesn't work. So we need to figure out new ways. But I mean, I used to play chess, and what's really interesting in chess is that you have what's called quick chess. So a normal game of chess, it normally takes 3-4 hours. But then you have quick chess. I mean, you also have this sort of letter chess that takes several weeks to play. But this sort of element of thinking about time, I think that's quite new. So for me, it's the space issue. That's one thing where I think we will have hybrids between, digital first, then the really great physical, and then digital again. Then in terms of time, I think there will, various things will happen there, both in terms of how you work together, except for this sort of time difference. There is obviously an issue of when you write the paper together, it can be really beneficial. Like, if Roel is in Sydney, and then Lukas, you and I are here in Stockholm, that the paper constantly keeps moving 24 hours. That in itself, I think, is really interesting in terms of speed of a paper when you divide up. So I think that time element is something new that's going to happen. And thirdly, I would say with changes or how you experiment both in space and in time, I think the identity of researchers is going to change. I think you will see that, as things change both spatially and temporally, you will have a broader variety of individuals, specializations, and so in that sense, I'm a curious person. So I think the future has a lot of interesting things moving forward.
Martin, that was an excellent discussion. Thank you so much for your insights, and you're curious, but you're also very innovative, and we all know that. So it was so great for us to get insights into how you organized this conference, and you clearly did an amazing job. And I think from your experiences, there's a lot that we can learn going forward, and that we can use to improve this format also. So thank you so much for this. Thanks everyone for tuning in to this episode on Positive Perspectives on Accounting today with Martin Carlsson-Wall from the Stockholm School of Economics on virtual conferences. We'll continue this little mini-series on the coronavirus and effects on academia by also looking at the teaching field. So we will have some videos, so stay tuned and see you soon.
Thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Happy accounting, everyone.